Chapter 21. Becoming That Which You Despise. With a fresh ejection of Zyme directly into her human Norcox brain, Elizabeth made her way down the hall to join other heads of state for a conference on climate change. Most of them being halflings such as Howard, they had gathered hours before, but now it was time to put the decisions of the High Council into action. With Zyme speeding up her system, Elizabeth felt more like the Norcox she had been before becoming a halfling. It was not something she wanted to give up for a human body, but a drug created from them helped. Once, many lives ago, she had held the position of High Council of the Norcox. That, too, was something she had not wanted to give up, swearing to herself to one day feel the power of rising above all others on the disk once again. For now, with assistance from Zyme, she felt that power on Earth with all but a few halfling leaders looking to her for guidance due to her former station as High Council. One thing she wished most of all, other than being a full Norcox once again, was to change the paintings out for those used to decorate the walls of Norcox facilities, holographic images of their past High Council holders. Being a halfling, she could not even enjoy viewing them when on the moon station due to the human body's inability to handle the technological upgrades required to enjoy any of the other benefits it provided. If we could only find a way to protect ourselves from radiation on this damn planet, Elizabeth thought for the 1,000th time over decades, we could find the source with little effort and be done with all this. The thought of the radiation field around Earth always led to memories of before the pulsar that brought the high levels of radiation throughout the solar system. Memories of when she and Hinsa conducted research on human evolution in the hopes of one day regaining the natural reproduction abilities the Norcox lost from the integration of technology to increase intellect and longevity. The Hoganlow had fought for each of their respected worlds, and before the pulsar they were going to help regain the Norcox ability to create new consciousness. Creating bodies was very easy, but over millennia, 16% of those consciousnesses was lost, dying, disconnected from the source. With a population spreading beyond the source range throughout a vast galaxy, there were greater chances of disconnect than ever. With no new Norcox, they had doomed themselves. Even now, they plotted their own destruction with the elimination of the Hoganlow on EX3, struggling to focus on the here and now rather than what was or what was to be. Elizabeth instead focused on enduring all the dead Hoganlow memorialized in spatters of mineral substances. Often, while on the Zyme, she could even smell egg used in some of the 100-year-old paints. The hallways and staircases in her 10 Downing Street home were quite extensive, taking a great deal of time to move from one area to another, causing her to often think about letting the anti-gravity transportation technology be released. Systems such as that were top of the ban list for human advancements, and a breach in that ban coming from her would eliminate any chance she might have had of regaining position of High Council. Therefore, she walked down the hall as she had done for decades, sometimes as a man and others as a woman. For Elizabeth, they were one in the same. She hoped that this time would be the last her consciousness would be placed in another human body, as it had been each time a new prime minister was elected. She checked her appearance in the antique hallway mirror mounted in a gold frame, not for signs of her outfit or hair being out of place, but for identifying marks of Zyme usage. With the wrinkles created by her last ejection sufficiently dissipated, she continued to the room where many others had already gathered. Not long after she entered, Howard walked up, offering a greeting as though they had not seen each other in months rather than the 8 it had been. "How do you do, Prime Minister Mansell?" he asked, taking her hand as she offered it in the traditional human fashion. "Please, call me Elizabeth. We are all on first-name basis, are we not?" Elizabeth asked, first speaking to President Howard, then directing her question to the others gathered in the long room. With pleasantries over, they began talks of how polar ice in the north was shrinking, ocean water was cooling, and carbon dioxide levels were rising, all for sake of the few human leaders in the room, but mostly for the reporters broadcasting this meeting worldwide. Elizabeth laughed inside at how easy it was to manipulate the Hoganlow with simple changes in data and well-placed propaganda. Amusement for the meetings, much like her last injection of Zyme, wore off after a few hours. Searching for an opportunity to conclude the meeting, Elizabeth looked to her assistant Jared, who, much like a third-base coach in baseball, shared secret signals with her. After ensuring she had his attention, Elizabeth raised 2 fingers on her left hand, then slowly used them to brush some hair behind her left ear. With a slight nod from Jared, she eagerly waited for the next 2 minutes to pass. Then it happened. Off to her side, where Jared stood, he answered a phone that never rang. Jared spoke for a few seconds to a caller who was not there, and then walked over to the Prime Minister of England. "Ma'am, we have another engagement you are scheduled to attend," Jared said, making her almost believe there was. "Very well. Ladies and gentlemen, I am afraid time has come to adjourn. There are other matters that need my attention." She stood as she addressed the room, even though the energy, alertness, and self-awareness had all but left her. "Thanks, Prime Minister Mansell, for hosting this conference, and I hope we may get together again soon to further our goals," one of the human leaders stated, only causing her to fight the irritability that followed Zyme. "That is quite okay. I too look forward to our next meeting. Good day." She ignored everyone in the room as she turned to leave, only to be stopped by Howard. "Elizabeth, we now have uprising in the Middle East. We also need to discuss other matters," he informed her. Struggling to hide her discomfort, Elizabeth smiled kindly at Howard before replying, "20 minutes in my office and bring the others." This time she moved to exit without stopping even as other heads of state neared to say their farewells. Following close behind, Jared kept pace, ready to run interference for her. Fortunately, being the first to leave the conference meant the hall was empty with the exception of staff that already did their best not to even look at Elizabeth. Feeling as though the hall had grown longer since walking down it just 2 hours ago, Elizabeth felt the withdrawals of the Zyme more than any time before. Speaking quietly with her words strung out, Elizabeth tried to look back to Jared. "Jared, your assistance is going to be required." Understanding what she was requiring, Jared quickly stepped around her to open her office door. Though he felt it was necessary to assist her inside by wrapping his arm around her waist, they both knew with the surveillance system in the halls it would not appear proper and that it was not the assistance she had required. Just inside the office, with the door between her and the hall camera, Jared watched helplessly as she collapsed on the antique rug covering the office floor. Without panicking, Jared gently closed the door, engaging the lock the second he heard the latch. He urgently walked over to a portrait of Winston Churchill, placing his fingers on the bottom edge, activating bioscanner and disengaging the magnetic locks holding that section of wall in place. Still holding onto the frame, he swung the wall open, revealing Elizabeth's lab where she secretly worked to perfect the Zyme for use with the human body, a lab that looked nothing like it did when Churchill first had it installed during World War II to act much like a panic room in the event a German suicide squad stormed the building. No, now it contained the galaxy's most desired drug, Zyme. Jared spotted the injection device and a cube containing the latest mixture of the drug, which had worked well but lasted no more than a few hours, on her research table. He reached for a shelf containing many metal cubes with the longer-lasting formulas. Removing a cube with geometric symbols covering every inch, Jared placed the pencil-shaped metallic rod to its surface. Within the span of a breath, lights changed with a light hissing sound as the injector charged. Jared paid close attention when placing the cube back onto the exact spot he had removed it, knowing how Elizabeth liked her lab. With everything just as it had been when he entered with the exception of the injection device in his hand, Jared walked over and knelt alongside her on the rug. He carefully placed the tip of the device to her nostril and began sliding it in till it made contact with a hiss. Before he could remove it from her cavity, her head flew back, and up at the same time her body convulsed, forming an arch and pulling away from the injector. Startled, Jared jumped back out of her way just in time for her body to spring back the other direction. Getting up like a spring, a slight fear came over him, seeing her eyes blacken with shadows growing under the skin around them. Then came the demonic smile as wrinkles shot from her eyes out each side. Jared felt a shiver run from his core outward, moving into his skin and vibrating the fine hairs all over his body. Seconds later, the wrinkles began to dissipate with the blackness of her eyes. Those two things hardly bothered him, but the smile ate its way into his dreams. "Was I out long?" Elizabeth asked, slowly turning her head to face him while trying to speak through the smile. With another colder, deeper shiver racing up from deep within, Jared replied, "No, ma'am, just 2 or 3 minutes." More than ever, it was moments like these that made him wish he had never discovered her secret existence. Seemingly defying gravity, Elizabeth stood up in one swift motion. "Good. I will have to go down a different path with the next formula." Walking over and securing the entrance to her lab, Jared wanted to leave while the smile still persisted. "Yes, ma'am. Will there be anything else?" "Which batch did you use?" she asked, not wanting to go through that experience again anytime soon. "The previous one, ma'am," he answered, trying not to look directly at her. "You have been a great help. Jared, you might make a full Norcox one day," Elizabeth stated, reminding him why he assisted her and the other halflings with their goals. The thought of one day having his consciousness transferred into a Norcox body for thousands of years brought a smile to his face, easing the sight of her wicked expression. Though what she wasn't telling him is it was not possible. It had been one of the many experiments attempted during her time before the pulsar, each time only killing both the human and Norcox body. "That will be all. Oh, do try and hold up the others for the next 5 minutes. I want to freshen up." She motioned with her right hand for him to leave the office. Alone for the first time in hours, Elizabeth pressed a button just on the underside of her desk, activating magnetic locks to the door behind Jared. Her mind was not as alert and energized as it had been with the latest version of Zyme, but she felt at this point it was worth the trade-off of having it last 4 times as long. She reached down, opening her desk drawer, and retrieved a case containing a very special pair of sunglasses. Placing them on her face, she spoke one word in Norcox, translated as, "I will rule again." With one word, everything around her went black with the feel of cold all around her, though she had not left her office chair. The primitive technology on EX3 almost made things unbearable, but it was times such as this that helped as she stood in her Norcox form, looking around in the darkness with only a glowing red symbol on the wall to keep her company. It was basic-looking, but, at the same time, complex, representing a square, a circle, and a triangle. Though it stimulated thought in most that arrived in this place, Elizabeth had long lost interest in the Zoetarian symbol. Walking around the room, feeling restless, she wondered how much longer her wait would be till one of them showed. Since the full interior of their ship was black, the Zoetarians, with little to no light, seemed to appear out of nowhere, but since she knew where they entered, she could see the door drop down. There, standing in the entrance, was what could only be described as a pure white bat-like creature standing 6 feet in height, wearing a green and black cloak wrapped tight around its body like a cocoon. "Elizabeth, you were not scheduled for contact," the Zoetarian spoke. With a hint of frustration in her voice, Elizabeth replied, "Golna, you told me you would be able to eliminate the team if I got you the information you required. My follower came through with his information on the team moving for the crystal, but you didn't. 2 of them plus the German are still out there somehow evading a surveillance network we spent decades putting into place. Explain how this little arrangement is going to work if you cannot complete a simple task such as this." The Zoetarians were an easily agitated race, but due to extreme training as infants, they rarely ever attacked. This was one time, however, Elizabeth was grateful she was nothing more than a holographic projection aboard their ship since her loud, aggressive speech provoked the Zoetarian. She watched as Golna's eyelids closed while his body vibrated under the cloak, and after just a few seconds he said, "You are correct, and the issue will be resolved. Just remember that I went to great lengths to acquire those programmers from that frozen wasteland for you. I had better see results. It also appears someone has activated transport for Antarctica. I will probe the mind of that fool Guerrero. They think their Home Defense Council can foil my plans to regain High Chair. We will see about that. The Antarctica base may have to be destroyed. She willed herself to speak with a calm voice when referring to the lab in Antarctica. Yes, and we provide you with our technology since your more advanced equipment will not work on the planet if it wasn't there before the pulsar. You're just fortunate everything wasn't scavenged by others. Why do you not inform your Norcox leaders of the human resistance? Golna mocked. Unwilling to argue about why their technology would not work on EX-3 after the pulsar, Elizabeth skipped over that comment. The High Council has decided not to do anything about your abducting Hoganlow. Just don't get greedy. These Hoganlow creators' attempt at taking control is meaningless, but may provide me with what I need to regain high chair. Her attention turned now to her need for Zyme. Enough about this. I also require a new shipment dropped off at the regular place. Very well. If that is all, I must get back to my duties. Yes, take care of the Hoganlow before they find the crystal. Remember our deal. You get all the protein and insulin you require only if I am reinstated as High Council. That can only happen if I am the one to free the tens of thousands of consciousnesses trapped inside these X3 source crystals. Instantly, Elizabeth was back in her office, staring through very dark lenses. They really need to have some kind of greetings and goodbyes. Knock, knock, knock. Removing the glasses, Elizabeth quickly secured them back into the desk drawer, preventing them from being recognized by the other halflings. It was time to implement the High Council plans, but slow them down without being noticed. Looking back over the last 24 hours, Elizabeth worried she might be coming to much like the Hoganlow she despised. She pressed the button to release the magnetic locks while calling out, "Come in!"